Hey everybody, happy Saturday. Hope everyone had a good week in the short trading week. Let's go over some charts into next week. We're going to go over the broad markets and then about, let's say, 7 or 8 different stocks into the week ahead as well. Starting with SPY, you guys can see here that we anchored the Alpha Trends anchored VWAP from this capitulation point on June 29th before the reversal of the trend to new highs. And you can see here that this area has been quite an area of interest for buyers. We didn't get necessarily down to this June 29th anchored VWAP, but we did get down to this this July 14th anchored VWAP. That was the last candle to touch this VWAP before the next move up. This is how Brian Shannon teaches the anchored VWAP handoff, and this is a great example of using it and finding a level of interest. You can also see the anchored volume by prices from this June 29th low as well, and you can see how well that the price is respecting this general area for possibly a level of interest for buyers. Now, on the weekly side of things, you can see here that this looks remarkably similar. These two particular setups here, 1 versus 2. We've got this kind of melt up, blow off top here, and then a pullback. Same exact thing here. We did have an actual wick that ripped up higher. I'm going to blame that on SoftBank for their option shenanigans that went on. But regardless, this does look very similar here. And you can see that we really are forming almost the same exact setup. Will we continue up and hit new highs before reversing again into the elections? We'll just have to see. Going into the Qs, we can see here a very similar situation. This is the Alpha Trends anchored VWAP handoff from this March 23rd low, and you can see this is really a ribbon. And if I move this anchored volume by price here, you can see that there is quite a bit of volume kind of in this general area. And so you can see here that we do have this volume shelf that held with the anchored VWAP here. But if we did break down, there's another massive shelf here around 258 to 260. And then on the weekly chart, this is something we've been talking about for the last few weeks now. This weekly chart was just so far outside of the monthly Bollinger Band, and it was almost guaranteed that we were going to have to pull back. This was just so overextended. But you can see here what happened, right? We did this back in July, pulled back, and then just continued up. So remember, the Bollinger Bands are flexible. Just because the price is outside of them doesn't mean the price can't just continue up with them. So will that be the case here? We'll have to see, but we will see in a couple other charts that some of these tech names do still look a little overextended, but that's not my place to say where they're going. That's the market's place, and we'll just have to see what happens. Going into IWM, you guys can see here that same exact thing. We anchor the VWAP from this this July 9th low, and remember, we generally want to anchor from these kind of capitulation points. You could do it from here as well, but you can see here that it's just not as clean. So what I like to do is I kind of like to take a clean area to do it from. This has been an area of support or a level of interest in the past on July 31st. And so then once again, we did close right at this area, right at this offset on the Alpha Trends anchored VWAP. And then we did tag this volume shelf almost perfectly. Now on the weekly side of things, you can see here that anchoring the two VWAPs from this March low and then this May low, there's still room to move down. And we'll have to just see what happens here and see if this does continue down to possibly test this area of interest below as it has in the past, and we'll just go from there. Going into the VIX. VIX is one of those that looked a little interesting last week, especially on Friday when everything thought this thing was going to explode, and then it just kind of melted. So as you can see here, we still do have this massive gap below. You can also see here that we do have almost a perfect test of this resistance zone if we did continue down next week, which would still kind of still be kind of a breakout. But the VIX does not work like other charts. It's kind of hard to chart the VIX a lot of the time because it's just not necessarily the same type of movements that you're going to get in a stock, because it's just it's a measure of puts versus calls in the market. It's not like an actual index or anything like that. So definitely something to keep in mind. And going into next week, we'll just have to see if this continues to melt down. So Apple, we'll have to go into some of the individual names here. Apple is one that did find a little bit of a bid here on this volume shelf here. And you can see here that we did kind of consolidate here for multiple days over the last week on the short week. if we anchor the VWAP or the volume by price and the VWAP from this kind of reversal point here, June 12th, you can see that we have not necessarily dropped all the way down to the anchored VWAP, but we are at this volume shelf here from the this anchor as well. Now going into the weekly, this is what's kind of like, this looks a little sketchy. We are still very far outside the monthly Bollinger Band here, and you know, we did close in this previous wick, and anytime that we've been outside, this far outside of the bands in the past, we have kind of mean reverted way back down to this basis moving average below for the Bollinger Bands around 70. That would be a massive drop from here, but it's happened in the past multiple times, so that is something to keep in mind on the bear case. Tesla, everybody's favorite stock. Now you can see here that we did anchor the VWAP from this reversal point here. You can see this has acted as a really decent area of interest for buyers along the way up. Once again on September 8th before bouncing up. But the main thing is there's not a ton of volume supporting price up here. Most of the volume is down around 300. And then if we look at the weekly, you'll see that we bounced almost perfectly on this trend line here. So what happens from here, we'll have to see. But Tesla does like to respect this trend line. It has respected it multiple times on the weekly chart. And it's Tesla. Everybody wants to buy it. So going into PTON, another favorite last week, we will turn this on log to get an idea of what's going on. And you'll see here that this has got to be one of the biggest engulfing candles I've seen in a hot minute. And this thing does like to do this often. So you can see here this was another engulfing candle, continuation down before reversing. So just because this is an engulfing candle on the bearish side does not mean this can't hold support here and continue up. But that is not for us to predict. That's for us to see what the market does and then take it from there. Now, the one thing about the weekly, sorry, I was going to say monthly, we did tag and almost close perfectly at the 3.618. Remember, these levels are not perfect. There's no perfect level in the market. Even though this does look pretty clean, that's not always going to be the case. As you can see on the daily, the weekly did blow off top kind of deal on this 3.618 extension, but then we closed right near it. So we'll have to see if that actually holds true for the bears into next week, and maybe we go and retest this 2.618, which would be the next level of interest below, which is also just the previous consolidation area before the move up. And we'll just see how it goes into next week. Twitter, this thing is going to be stuck at $39 a share probably for the next 10 years, it seems. If we anchor the volume by price from this same point that we're anchoring the VWAP from, you can see here that there is a massive amount of volume holding here. This is likely a reason why the price caught a bid here, as well as the Alpha Trends anchored VWAPs are also right in line with this shelf as well. On the weekly side of things, this was now really the third time this really retested this area. And you can see here what I've done is I've created two trend lines because, as we mentioned, there's nothing perfect in the market. You're going to have overshoots. You're going to have undershoots. You're going to have these things where the trend lines aren't going to be perfect. But this is another great example of the price respecting this general area. And what looked like a nice breakout ended up not being so much the case. Going into BYND, if I can spell it right, BYND. This is one that has really got my attention, and not, not that I'm giving you guys trade ideas. We're really just going over a couple different stocks to highlight the platform. But it'd be stupid not to highlight some of these things. We have this huge rounded bottom here on BYND. You can also see here that we have this massive Alpha Trends anchored VWAP pinch. If we anchored the volume by price from this March low, you'll see that we are really getting coiled and tight within this area. The price has now respected this Alpha Trends anchored VWAP from the upside swing high multiple weeks in a row, and most of the volume is now holding here, which makes this essentially a break-even zone, because this is where a majority of people holding. If the price is holding here, then everyone's holding at essentially break-even. If supply dries up, demand doesn't even really need to increase for this to take a move up. So going into GLD, this one's looking very interesting. It's one holding this huge volume shelf and these Alpha Trends anchored VWAP handoffs here, or if you want to call it a ribbon. But look at how much volume is really holding here, creating a base for price. And then you can see here on the weekly side of things, we've got this massive bull flag forming. And let's just go ahead and turn off the volume by price. And you can see here that this is definitely consolidating after a big move up. Pretty bull flaggy looking to me. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it is in that general setup. And we'll just have to see if this does actually materialize going into the weeks ahead into October. Boeing is one that everybody's still pretty bullish on, but we have this descending triangle, which most of the time is not considered bullish. However, I've seen them break out both ways, so break down or break out. But you can see here, if we're looking at the anchored volume by price, we can really see here that you do have quite a bit of volume holding at a loss right now. So remember, this big volume block right here tells us that a majority of shares are holding around 173 up to around 184. So with the price being down at 160, most of these shares are holding at a loss right now. And so will supply dry up, or will people start taking a loss and taking their money elsewhere? We'll just have to see what happens, but this is a market recap going into the week ahead. Hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully everyone has a great weekend. Remember, 35% off until Sunday at midnight. We also have our big event tomorrow with 8 different traders going over their strategies. That starts at 11 a.m. Eastern, so make sure to check that out. We'll be posting about it on Twitter. Everyone have a great Saturday and happy trading into next week.